Let's talk about the other one, hockey. National Hockey League, the original six. I grew up in hockey. All we cared about was the New York Rangers and the Boston Bruins. And then those guys up north, we disliked Montreal and the Toronto Maple Leafs. And there were six teams, Chicago Blackhawks, Detroit Red Wings, etc. And they just kind of drifted along. They had their corner of the sports world. That those fans loved it. Those players played. There were only six major league teams. The minor leagues, there were minor leagues at all different levels. Those guys went there and they stayed there for 9 years because they couldn't get to the big show because there were only six sets of jobs available. Great. I remember a guy by the name of Terry Sawchuk, goaltender. I'd met him when I was young. He wound up with the Detroit Red Wings, had a really nice career. Guy was in the minor leagues for 9 years. You know how bad the minor leagues are in hockey? Riding buses, drinking beer, eating hamburgers. Holy cow. It's a tough existence. Then the league started to expand in bits and pieces. And all of a sudden, we woke up one morning and they added 6 teams. They went from 6 to 12 immediately. I said, wow. And here came the Philadelphia Flyers and the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Vancouver Canucks, etc. And then all of a sudden, and they were selling out all these games, but there's limited revenue streams. It was not a national TV contract. It was only in New York because they cared about the Rangers or Chicago or Detroit. Here came the rival leagues right at the start of the 70s, World Hockey Association. And much like the NFL, NHL said, no big deal. They're never going to survive. They're in secondary markets. And they signed Jerry Cheevers of Boston. And they signed Bobby Hull of the Blackhawks. And they started to raid all the draft picks. And then they changed their rule. And the WHA said, you're good enough, Wayne Gretzky, we're going to sign you at age 18. NHL age limit was 21. And they took all these guys that had been stuck in New Haven and Tidewater and in the minor leagues. They signed all them and gave them bigger paydays.
Wow.
All of a sudden, the WHA became a competitor to the National Hockey League. And when they started taking NHL goaltenders and overpaying them, and the guy went across the street, and then they started signing the 18-year-old draft picks who wanted to play immediately for a payday rather than have to wait till 21. Here came Gretzky and here came SEA. And then they were the first ones who went to Europe. And they mined all the gold out of Europe. They brought all these players from Russia who defected at that time from behind the Iron Curtain at great risk to their families. And they went to Finland, they went to Sweden. They started to sign all those Euros. All of a sudden, the league got really decent. But at the end of the day, the credit card bill came due, and they had real money problems because they never could get a really true national contract. And then because they were killing the NHL, they went to a merger table, and they got a deal done, and they took 4 WHA teams and brought them in. And Edmonton came in the NHL. I was in Cleveland as the voice of the Crusaders. WHA, we were really a good team and was supported really well. And we did not get into the NHL, and the team went away and the league went away. The league got bigger and better, and now it's a truly global sport. And they're bringing players in from Russia, and they're drafting kids, Sweden, Scandinavia. Team USA's national program has now put kids at the top of the draft board. It's fascinating how it's become a really good global game. And hockey, like the NBA, like Major League Baseball, they're playing in their flag places, and they're playing regular season games now abroad. It's just great. And it's no longer just a little regional sport. It's just no longer the Detroit Red Wings in that state.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's the whole country, and it's abroad. And TV contracts, they televise all hours of the day in all types of places. I mean, it's fascinating to me how the league has exploded. Funny story, when I worked in Ohio, in Cleveland, again, this is a talk show host, never afraid to call a phone number. I called the National Hockey League to try to set up an interview with the then commissioner, Clarence Campbell, who'd been there forever. He answered his own phone.
Right on.
Right on. And I told him who I was, and I said, I would like to set up a phone interview for the people of Cleveland, just talk about hockey. And he gave me 15 to 20 minutes. It was fascinating.
Good for you.
It's a different time now in terms of doing sports talk and trying to get guests there, because there's 8,000 stations and everybody's trying to do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But so, I mean, to see how hockey has exploded, it's become a truly global game. It's become a big international game. the Olympics, the World Hockey Championships. What I think took the NHL to a different level was when they formed the Canada Cup, and we played, and the success of Team USA in 1980. The Miracle on Ice.
Oh, yeah.
Beating the professionals who, quote, were the Russians.
Yeah, that was big.
Phenomenal. I've been to Lake Placid. I've been in that arena. I mean, you can't speak. It's just so much history just rains down on you.
Right.
But the game is so good, so fast, so athletic. And now it's truly a global game. So that's my spin on where the NHL was, where it's come today.
Well, I have a question. It's interesting to me because this is NHL merger with WHA, but it also happened in the NBA. The NBA and the ABA merged. And you said only 4 teams came to the NHL. And I know that was what happened with the ABA. Only 4 teams came into the NBA. Why didn't the other markets get in? What was the reason?
Well, because they asked for an entrance fee. And a lot of the other markets were dying and starving. And ownership. At that point, hockey following had not exploded. San Diego for 3 years, had a WHA team, was pretty good, called the San Diego Mariners.
Oh, wow.
But they had trouble paying their bills because they had to pay big money. They stole a guy from the Philadelphia Flyers, Andre-LaCroix, great hockey player, but he's making big money. And now you got to sign all these other guys to have a 23-man roster. They just could not make it financially work. And then the NHL says, because they were bleeding, and the WHA was bleeding, and they said, okay, we'll do this merger, but you got to pay X million dollars to come in as an expansion franchise. And then they worked a deal where they allowed, it was Edmonton, Winnipeg, Hartford, Connecticut, and maybe Quebec City. Those are the ones I think those were the 4 that finally showed up. And they worked a deal. The WHA said, well, if we're going to pay $3 million entrance fee per club, you have to let us keep our stars. And the NHL said yes. So that's how Gretzky and Messier and Lowe and Grant Fuhr stayed in Edmonton. And that was a foundation of a really good franchise.
Yeah.
And Winnipeg had Bobby Hull was still there. And they had brought in a whole group of European players that changed the game. And Anders Hedberg and Ulf Nilsson, guys that hockey fans would know. I remember the first time I did a Cleveland-Winnipeg game in Winnipeg. And these guys didn't play at the pace our teams played at. They weaving and passing. All of a sudden, a guy was open in front of the net and the puck was in the net. They mesmerized you. You didn't know how to defend it because you'd never seen it. It was the Euro style. And then Quebec came in, and they loved the Montreal Canadiens, Flying Frenchmen and all that. And first time I saw the Quebec Nordique, and they had really great skaters. Holy cow. Fire wagon hockey up and down, pucks, shots on goals, just ridiculous. So they brought a Euro style and a very different style when they merged. The NHL became better because of what the guys from the WHA style-wise brought into the game.
That's cool. It's interesting to learn more about hockey because growing up in the Bay Area, hockey was a very foreign thing for us. But didn't San Francisco have a team, the Seals?
California Golden Seals, owned by Charlie Finley. That didn't work out well either.
Was that WHA or NHL?
That was NHL.
It was?
Yes.
What years was that?
That had to be in the 60s into the 70s, and then they wound up moving. Actually, they moved into Cleveland when the WHA went away. The California Golden Seals moved to Cleveland, became the Cleveland Barons, but that didn't work either.
Interesting. Okay. Well, but still, I'm a hockey rookie, as a fan, learning more about the sport and just hanging out with you. I'm picking up a lot of it.
So just make sure you circle on your calendar Friday night, September 29th. Circle that. Beer Friday night, Sports Arena. The Gulls will host. LA Kings and the Anaheim Ducks are going to play an NHL preseason game in here on Friday night, September 29th. So just tell the wife.
Really?
That you're going to go down and drink beer, and you'll be the one that'll be pounding on the plexiglass during the game.
I'm going to definitely go to that. I mean, that sounds like a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah.
So that's preseason, but still great. And maybe we'll get a chance to see the new draft pick.
We'll find out. Interesting. I hope you've enjoyed it. We're deciding.